Welcome back, everyone, to Debating Metal. I'm your host, Kenneth Dean, the Dean of Metal, along with my co-host, Chris K. This is the podcast where we talk about all things hard rock and heavy metal. And this week, we're going head-to-head with Van Halen versus David Lee Roth, 5150 versus Eat 'Em and Smile.
The albums from the former bandmates came out just a mere 4 months apart. We're going to go over the songs from both records and determine which is the better album. And Kenneth has another shot of Rusty Metal for you, so stick around for that.
But first, some legalese. If you enjoy the show and you want to hear some more, click the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform and get the show on your favorite device about every week or so.
We also want to interact with you guys and read your opinions, so if you like what we had to say or just want to rip us a new one, send us an email to debatingmetal@gmail.com or DM us on our Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We're also now on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and ring that YouTube bell to be alerted each week when we drop a new episode. So, Kenneth, what's your Rusty Metal pick?
All right. This week, I've got something that a lot of people are going to say is not metal. A lot of people are going to say, what, are you sold out? Something to that effect. They're probably not going to like it. But if they're like me, or even a tad like you, they're going to be able to open up their ears and understand that what I'm about to tell them is pretty damn good. This week's Rusty Metal goes back to 1995. So that's the height of the grunge era. And it's the band Mad Season with their one and only album, Above. It was released on Columbia Records. It was produced by Mad Season and Brett Eliason, and it was recorded at Bad Animal Studios in Seattle, Washington. So Mad Season is a side project that was formed by Mike McCready, the guitarist for Pearl Jam, and Barrett Martin, the drummer for Screaming Trees. Mike McCready met bassist John Baker Saunders in rehab in Minneapolis. So the trio basically played together when they came back to Seattle, and McCready then brought in Alice in Chains singer Lane Staley to round out the lineup, hoping that Lane would get himself sober after working with sober musicians himself. It didn't quite exactly work out that way, but regardless, the album for me is a very eclectic album with a variety of influences. There's blues, there's jazz, there's rock, and there's metal all over this album. There's xylophones on the album. There's a saxophone on the album. So it's a very diverse album. The album starts with a song called Wake Up, which has this real quiet, smooth bass intro that is as haunting as it is beautiful. And I love that song. It never really gets past, it's really slow, but it's hard to say slow like as a ballad slow. It's just like kind of like this meditating type of song. I love that song. Whenever I'm in the mood for quiet and I just want to listen to music that's quiet, I throw that song on, and it's amazing to me. I love that song. The album also contains the single River of Deceit and standout tracks I Don't Know Anything, Lifeless Dead, and Long Gone Day. Most of the songs are not fast. They're not fast. They're not heavy. But for me, that's really what I love about this album. There's this prevailing theme throughout the album because of Lane Staley's lyrics, and that's the big standout thing. That's where Lane shines on this album because of his deeply introspective lyrics. But the music is quiet and it's haunting, and it gets loud and it gets obnoxious, and then it gets quiet and it gets meditative. And it's just such a cool, to me, that's just what makes this album so cool. And so, anyone listening out there, you're going to sit there and say, that's not a metal album. No, it's not a metal album. It's not even grunge, even though it's considered like one of the top grunge albums of all time. I wouldn't even consider it grunge. But because it's Seattle and it came out in 95, people consider it grunge. I just consider it a really good rock album. And I think if if you guys out there give it a chance, you'll understand what I mean when I say this is a really good album. It's still available on there. It's still available out there on all the streaming platforms. You can buy it physically with CD or cassette. I think is still available. If not,
Okay.
if not, it's been reissued that way. I don't know. I'm kind of joking about that one. But there is a deluxe version that was released in 2013, which is expanded. So it's got more bonus tracks from the main album, but it also has a CD and a DVD of this really raucous performance that they had at the Moore in Seattle. So it's really cool. I have the VHS, so that tells you how long I've had that, and it's a really cool performance. So if you like that, you'll like watching that. This is very different, but I think it's very good, and I think you'll enjoy it. Let's check it out.
All right. I mean, it's. I would not say it's a metal album, but it's definitely a rock album, and the band members being tied into rock and metal, I think, is fair enough. So if you enjoyed, some of those other projects like Pearl Jam or Alice in Chains, and you'll probably enjoy it. I've heard it myself.
Absolutely. So that brings us to our main topic of the evening, and that is Van Halen versus David Lee Roth. I think we've done Sammy versus Dave in the past, but this one is a head-to-head album-wise. This is Van Halen's 5150, Sammy Hagar's first album with the band, versus David Lee Roth's Eat 'Em and Smile, his debut solo album that came out just a mere 4 months later, like you said earlier, in 1986. So we're going to go over Van Halen's first because it came out first, and then we're going to do David's album. Van Halen's 5150 was released in March of 1996, and it was released on Warner Brother Records. It was recorded at 5150 Studios in Studio City, California, and it was produced by Mick Jones of Foreigner fame, Don Landy, and Van Halen. Don Landy was the longtime engineer for Van Halen throughout this time. So, Chris, let's go over these songs. You start it up and tell me what you think, and then I'll throw my opinion in there.
All right, so the album starts off with Good Enough. You can already hear the production no longer sounds live. Instead, the band is, producing themselves with a much slicker sound. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's definitely a change in the eras. So you can hear there's a distinct difference between what they were doing with David Lee Roth and now what they're going to be doing with Sammy Hagar. Alex is playing electric drums, and there's some keyboard synths. Not necessarily as much in this song, but in the upcoming tracks. And, some of that's continued over from 1984, where that was kind of introduced. But this is a different sound for Van Halen. Good Enough is a really fun rocker with some great guitar work. Sammy has some fun with the fictional waitress. He says, "Look here, ma'am," and when I heard that for years, I could not understand it, and the best I could understand was "banana man," and so there are some similarities. Like when David Lee Roth, it would do that kind of thing where he would interact with people, fictional people or the producer or something like that in some of the songs. Like, which track was that?
Mean Street is like that.
Main Street does it, but there's another one off of, it's off of Fair Warning. Unchained. Yeah, he does it in Unchained. So
both songs are...
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, both songs are on Fair Warning.
Yeah, so there's like some similarity to that kind of, just having fun vibe. But yeah, I mean, it's a cool song and it's a good start to the album.
I like Good Enough. I really, if you take Good Enough and you separate it from the rest of the album and you put in a whole album's worth of Good Enoughs, you would almost think that it was an extension of the old Van Halen. There's a lot... Like you said, there's a lot of things going on as soon as you put the album on and it starts to play. Definitely different production. And one thing I was thinking to myself today as I was listening to this album is that the two eras of Van Halen are so distinctly different sounding. And not about Alex's drums, because Alex went back to and played normal drums later on.
Mm-hmm.
But Eddie's guitar, and I don't know if it's the 5150 amp or the 5150 Studios, but Eddie's sound, even though it sounds, it's really weird to say this, it sounds the same, but yet completely different. You know, you can tell
it's
the guitar
not as
player,
warm. It's a little more sterile, I would say.
The word that I came up with when I was thinking about it is very mechanical sounding in my eyes. But you can tell that it's Eddie, obviously. And you can tell that it's Van Halen, obviously. But at the same time, it sounds like a new band. And that obviously is the Sammy Hagar effect. I like the song good enough. I think that's a really good song. And yes, I as soon as I heard the breakdown and he starts talking to the imaginary people or the producers or whoever's in the studio at that time, I'm like, this is exactly the same type of stuff that David Lee Roth did. And it's kind of weird that they actually did that, because you would have thought that they would have wanted to get away from the David Lee Roth antics. But maybe it was the band themselves that were causing the antics that David Lee Roth was just partaking in. So that kind of tells you something a little bit there.
Well, there's a little more of that later on, and I think there are things that definitely tie this album to the previous to the previous era, and there's songs that will show that as it goes on, but there's also some evolution from what they were doing with, the keyboards in 1984, etc. So, to me it sounds like a fairly logical step. The only difference is they had to step forward with a different singer rather than continuing with Dave. So, I think looking back now in hindsight, you can see it more than you probably could at the time,
Yeah, it's at the time it was just the whole fascination.
Yeah,
David Lee Roth is gone. What's it going to sound like? Oh, there's Sammy Hagar. Oh my God, what is this? There's a giggle stick. There's a giggle stick. What is that?
For sure.
So,
all right, that leads us into track 2, which is the first single. And interestingly enough, pretty much most of the songs on this album were released on a single, whether they were the main single or the B-side. So this is track 2, Why Can't This Be Love? It's funny to think that one of Van Halen's biggest singles had Sammy Hagar on guitar and Eddie on keyboards in all the live performances for basically the first couple of years that they were playing for both 5150 and OU812 tours. Of course, Eddie recorded the guitars for the album, but, it's interesting, like, when you would see them live, that Eddie wasn't even on guitar for one of their biggest singles. It's a really great song, though I kind of tend to like the live versions better than, what the version that's on 5150. It sounds a little more restrained, and it's got that interesting scatting from Sammy. I always thought was cool. It's a mostly keyboard played song, and it's something really different for Van Halen. So I understand, it was probably kind of scary to a lot of diehard fans going into it, but it also really bred them a lot of new fans.
I'm thinking about if that kind of changeover, if the bands existed or the artists existed at this time, and they kind of had that changeover today, what would have happened? Like everybody said the same exact words back then as they would say now, but now it's initials, now it's letters, and everyone knows what they mean, and everyone sees it on TV. Back then, when this song hit the first time and it premiered, there was a big, giant collective, what the fuck?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? There was that. I mean, I experienced it. I was there. I was 17. Well, yeah, I was 17 years old when this album came out. And it was like, what? And then, it was kind of like, oh, of course, this is the reason why Dave left, and this is the reason why Eddie was happy for David to be gone. he gets to play the keyboards. That was the attitude back then. And it was funny because, I heard it once and it never left my mind. And I said it earlier. This is the Giggle Stick song because of the way the keyboards are introduced at the beginning of the song. It sounds like a giggle stick. And you reference the fact that Eddie plays the keyboards live on this song in concert. Oh, someone had to, and Eddie's never been one to give someone else the job to play the secondary instruments. And I think maybe they did it a little bit later on. I don't know.
After OU812, they started having a guy play the keyboards backstage. So you didn't see it, but it became, he handed that off and he took the guitar back. So Sammy was just singing at that point.
Right. So, that was the thing too, when the band first got together, Eddie was so excited to have a second guitar player because then that allowed him to do more stuff with the keyboards. This song is really cool. I like this song. I actually did not like it when it first came out, although it's catchy as hell. It is absolutely, just one of those, those worm music that gets in your ear and it just stays with you forever. But I couldn't stand the song when it first came out. But of course, that was 1987. That's 33 years ago already. So it's a long time ago. So it is, as time grew older, as time went on and I grew older, I began to understand and appreciate the song for what it is. It's a really good song. Sammy singing on it is superb. The background vocals is superb throughout the entire album. Listening to it today again for the first time, really in a long time, it is absolutely a stunningly good album. But it's like in other parts of the album, it gets a little mechanical for me. But this song, hands down, was the right call to make as the first single.
I always find it funny how, people that listen to Van Halen from the very beginning are so drastically different in opinion from people that came in later. Like for me, when I listen to Van Halen, it really doesn't matter which era, between the two, discounting Gary Sharon's album, but between the two, like, it doesn't matter. I just enjoy all of it. But when I read reviews or if I listen to people talk about Van Halen that were around from the beginning, it's like there's such a not a disdain. I mean, some people, yeah, definitely there's a disdain for the Sammy Hagar era of the band, but there's this like, well, it's different than Dave,
Oh yeah,
and it's bound to happen. It's understandable.
I was part of it. But at the same time, I appreciated both sides.
Yeah.
I wasn't one of these people who was like, who chose sides and I said, I'm never going to listen to Van Halen.
Yeah.
I listened to Van Halen and I hated the fact that they that people called it Van Hagar. And I don't know what is the deal, but lately, even Sammy is calling it Van Hagar now. I don't know what the deal is, why this has now all of a sudden become a thing to call this Van Hagar. I don't know. Maybe it has to do with the fact that David Lee Roth was back in the band now. I have no idea. But, Sammy's been doing this whole putting some songs out or some clips out on Instagram with older stuff. We're doing things from that Van Hagar era. Mm-hmm. And it's so weird that he even calls it that now. It's just strange. But yeah, there was a dividing line back in the day. And I can understand your appreciation for it because you grew up and both singers already had existed, Yeah,
I mean, I grew up with Sammy Hagar on vocals for Van Halen when I was a kid. By 1986, he was in the band. But, by the time he left, I was about 10 years old. So I was listening to that, like that. In my perception, he was the lead singer. And then obviously, like, yeah, you on the radio, you'd hear the David Lee Roth stuff. So, there was both existed to me at that time.
Yep.
All right, so that leads us into track 3, which is Get Up. This is the B-side off of Why Can't This Be Love? So it's interesting to me that so many of these were released on singles before the album even came out. The track is really fun, and it kind of harkens back to some of their early work, sounding like the band is, barely kind of keeping up pace. But I mean that in a good way. Like there's this kind of, like a lot of the stuff that came out on, what's the name of the album? Women and Children First. There's this kind of like breakneck hecticness at times and stuff like that. And that's kind of what you get here, where it sounds like if they went any faster, the band would just fall apart, which is just, it's fun. There was always this kind of like borderline of sounding like jammy and sounding really precise. And I think that's one thing that's really unique about Van Halen's sound. In many ways, like with the background vocals and the overall sound, I would say this is one of the tracks that would appeal more to the David Lee Roth era fans, people that are bridging over between the two. I think it's a cool track.
You know what's funny about that the whole hecticness about the song? Mm-hmm. And you think about the breakneck speed that they're doing it at. Van Halen really didn't do that very much.
No, but there were times.
There were times. There was a perception that they did a lot of that. And it's funny because they did it on this song. And David, and we're going to talk about it on his album, he did it on that album, on Eat 'Em and Smile. Mm-hmm. But in reality, they had, the little drum solo at the end, at the beginning of Hot for Teacher, and there's some stuff that's on Women and Children First. But other than that, there really isn't any songs that are kind of crazy and hectic like these songs are. And it's funny because it almost is synonymous with Van Halen, the hectic, crazy drumming, and almost seems like the band's gonna the rubber band is gonna break and everybody's gonna snap, and it's just a strange thing that has become associated with the Van Halen sound. So, but I like the song. Get Up is a cool song. I like the fact that it's frenetic. I like the fact that it's a hectic pace. I think it's pretty cool, and they do sound really good on it. So it's one of those songs that. Let's see, it redefined Van Halen for being the sound that they are now at this point. But it also showed that Van Halen wasn't just, Why Can't This Be Love song? Because they've now done 2 more upbeat type of songs, and now you're getting into the fat part of the album.
I think part of that perception of that pace, that like breakneck, trying to like barely hold on to the pace kind of thing, also kind of comes from some of the solos that they did, because the band all had their own solos during the concerts. Right. And Alex Van Halen, he did the thing where he's drumming as fast as humanly possible. If you ever listen to Michael Anthony's bass solos, he would go from that really kind of like slow pace to like playing really fast. And then Eddie's obviously was kind of the same thing, and he'd stick his cigarette in the bridge of the guitar and all that stuff. So like I think part of that perception is from some of the stuff that's not even on the albums.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Yeah. All right, so that leads us into track 4, which is Dreams. It's the second single, which had Inside, the final track, as the B-side. One thing that Dreams does so well is showcase Sammy's vocal range. And I think that's like the biggest thing that I think you can take away from this track is it shows some really incredible ability from him as a singer. It tends to me at least, it sounds more like a Sammy Hagar solo track than Van Halen, because it's very different than a lot of the stuff that they did. but I really love the track. I think it's really good. The main solo, interestingly enough, it starts off for the first half of it with two notes that just go back and forth. And that's it, two notes. And then it goes off into something that's got, a little bit more dynamic range and emotion to it. And it's so interesting to me that there's not many guitarists out there that could just take two notes and give that much emotion to it.
And that's strange because Eddie has never been one of those guys that have been known to emote a lot when it comes to his guitar playing, because he was so natural at it, but at the same time he was so precise.
And not just that, there was always like a level of just having fun. It wasn't trying to place emotion in songs, but it was just like having a good time.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And a song like Dreams, it works because it is about emotion. And so it was very apropos to put that solo in there like that.
I think he brought some more emotion into the stuff that they did almost a decade later with Balance. Mm-hmm. It's a very different album than what you're listening to here, to be honest.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But yeah, Dreams, I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. So Dreams is a cool song. It's very, the keyboards sound like they're being hit. The notes, it's not a very soft kind of keyboard, but at the same time, the song is soft itself. It's a very contrasting kind of playing that he's doing, because you can almost hear him hitting the keys. But at the same time, the song is absolutely awesome. I agree with you. This is a showcase for Sammy's vocals. I love what he does on the song. Just the whole vocal package that's on this album is amazing. Just between him and Michael, and Nick you can sit there and say all you want, or people can argue all you want about the fact that it was the whole band doing background vocals. But after watching a video that came out this past year with Sammy and Michael doing background vocals on one of the Van Halen songs, I can't remember which song it was. I think it was on Best of Both Worlds. And it was being done. They were rehearsing it with the rest of the circle, and you heard exactly what you hear in a song like Dreams. You heard Sammy's high pitch, but you heard Michael's higher pitch, and how they harmonize so well together. So you hear it on Dreams, and it's like, yeah, you know who that is. And the vocals on this from both of them are just outstanding on this album.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Michael Anthony's sound is invaluable to that band. And I think we, saw that more as time went on. Mm-hmm. So that, excuse me. So that leads us into track 5, which is Summer Nights. This was the B side off of Love Walks In, which will be coming up soon. This is a really great party rock track. Again, probably suiting the old Van Halen fans as well as the new. The riff here is just as irresistible as the chorus. I mean, it's a song you can easily sing along to. Eddie just walks up and down the guitar the whole song, and it's really fun to listen to. This is like so relaxed yet so in depth at the same time. It's a really good track.
I like this. This was one of the first songs that I really got into on this album. I didn't get this album right away. This is at the time when CDs were starting to come out in the middle to late 80s. They were starting to make their presence known. But basically records and cassettes were the thing. I never went out and bought the record. So it was a CD that I got much later. So that was one thing. I was just listening to these songs on the radio. So I didn't hear all of them. I think a friend of mine may have given me a copy of the cassette. I don't remember exactly how it went down that I was able to listen to a lot of these songs, besides the fact that they were on the radio a lot.
Were you listening to it on Summer Nights on your radio?
Yes, probably. It's a cool song. I mean, it's one of those songs that when I'm out and about on a summer night, it just comes into my mind and I start singing it because it's so appropriate, you know. So I like the song a lot. I mean, this is a really bunch of good songs, and this one's one of them too.
Yeah, this is a Van Halen song to me. Like when I think of Van Halen, this one's one that comes to mind.
And again, the background vocals are outstanding on this.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That leads us to track 6, Best of Both Worlds. To me, it's not a bad rocker. It's a very singable song. It's pretty basic and uncomplicated. Even the solo's a bit understated. I don't really understand why this became one of their biggest staples, to be honest. I think it's one of the simpler songs in the Van Halen catalog. I get the chorus is very recognizable. It's catchy, but to me, it's just kind of like it's. I wouldn't even necessarily say mediocre. It's just really simple, and maybe that's the popularity, I guess.
I think that might have a lot to do with the popularity of it. I mean, people can get into it just because it's a simple song. Mm-hmm. You know, Elvis Presley played very simple songs, so that tells you everything you need to know. So,
yeah, but I mean, in the grand scheme of like comparing it to a lot of other stuff from Van Halen, this is a lot simpler.
It's catchy. Everything that they've done on this album so far is really catchy, and it's a tribute to the continued songwriting of Eddie in terms of the song structure. Mm-hmm. But it also is an absolute testament to the ability of Sammy Hagar to write a song. And this is what I was thinking about earlier. If you think about the David Lee Roth songs from the Van Halen era, they're not complicated songs in terms of lyrics. They're not really deep songs in terms of lyrics. And they have a lot of songs that are just literally like 1 or 2 syllable choruses. You know, or maybe 1, 2, 3, like Unchained, you know, Jump. I mean, you got Jump, you got Unchained, Panama. You know, there's not a lot in terms of complicated choruses, but you got Sammy comes in. Why can't this be love? You got the best of both worlds. Hot summer nights. I mean, that's 3 syllables for the most part, but he's able to make it sound different.
Yeah, but there's like a little bit of a story to some of the songs, and I'm not saying that's not the case on the David Lee Roth stuff.
No, the David Lee Roth has interesting stories on there, but Dave's stories are relatively simple overall. You know, I don't know. I think there's so much more maturity in terms of songwriting from Sammy Hagar compared to David Lee Roth that, you know, it shows. And so you got something like the best of both worlds where there's this, you know, this slow verses and he's just kind of talking to you almost. And then, you know, they build it up to get to the chorus that really just kind of hits everybody. I think that's cool, you know? So.
Yeah, I can see that. You know, like some of the songs though, like if I remember correctly, like going over the lyrics for Best of Both Worlds, they're not that great. I mean, I would say more so on some of the later stuff. You know, I remember this particular song being kind of like nonsense, but I understand exactly what you mean. I mean, even like the next song that's coming up, Love Walks In, has some really interesting lyrics that I think take a little bit of thinking about to really grasp. You know, some of the other, like 5150 has some you know, pretty good lyrics as a whole. But especially as time went on with the band, the lyrics became more and more prominently featured, you know, in some of the songs. So, I completely get what you're saying. There is a level of maturity that Sammy brought in. So
Absolutely.
all right, that brings us to track 7, which is Love Walks In. It's the third single with Summer Nights as the B-side. What a weird song. I could never tell, like when I was listening to this when I was younger, what exactly Sammy was singing about. Obviously, he was talking about love. He was talking about aliens. He was maybe talking about love with aliens. I don't know. It was never one of my favorites. It was a popular ballad. I'm not sure that it ever kind of hit the heights that they were expecting. Maybe bringing in a ballad. This was one of the things that Eddie felt that they could not do with David on vocals, and that's true. He wasn't really suited for doing ballads.
No, he wasn't at all.
At all. The guitar work's pretty nice. It's a decent song, but it never appealed to me per se. It hit number 22 on the charts, so I don't know. What do you think about this track?
For what it's worth, the track itself is a good track. It's a ballad. It's a song that's definitely going to cross over. It became, a song that people would play at weddings. It became a song that people would play when you wanted to slow down the party and everyone wanted to hold each other. That was the first one of the Van Halen songs that you could really do that to. There would be some more that would come later, but while you were talking here, I'm reviewing some of the lyrics, and then it hit me. What, not just this song, but the Best of Both Worlds and some of the other songs that came later in their catalog. The one thing about Sammy that is really cool, and he walks a very fine line, is a lot of his songs are very, very spiritual. They're not religious, so you can't take it that way, but spiritual, about the inner being, about the universe, about heaven and earth. Even though, heaven, the connotation is religious, but for some people, they may still believe in heaven. They may not have the same beliefs that other people have, or heaven and hell in general, good and bad. So for me, Sammy his lyrics are very spiritual. And in this particular case with Love Walks In, it's more about, the sense of being, I guess you could say, the sense of something else out there, the sense of, still being together. It's a very strange song in that regards lyrically, but there's this sense of, love. It's just hard to say. Really,
That's just a funny way to put it. Yeah,
exactly. So the song is almost like, when someone walks in and it's just, there's that that burst of excitement when you see someone for the first time that you haven't seen in a while, or the first time you see your wife in the day or after a long day of work. You're excited to see that person. There's that little burst of energy that pops up into your heart. And I think that's really what the song is about in a nutshell. And it to me, it works. They've done better ballads. But this was their first attempt at it, and it crossed over and they got pretty far. It's a better attempt than, say, some of the stuff that, Rainbow and Richie Blackmore did, and other bands that have attempted to try and cross over. So this was it right there.
I think for a long time, just based on things that have been said, Eddie wanted to do this kind of thing, and it just wasn't really possible. So this was his ability to explore and try something different. So I can't take anything away from it. And I'm not even saying it's a bad song or anything like that. Personally, it just never clicked with me. So, and there is one other interesting thing about it is that Sammy has said that he believes in aliens. So I don't know.
Yeah. He's a strange cat.
He's an interesting cat. Yeah,
he is.
Okay, so that leads us into track 85150, the title track. I have to say, this is one of my favorite riffs that Van Halen ever produced. Something about it just resonated with me. It's a pretty straightforward rocker. There's a lot more energy and soul than some of the tracks like Best of Both Worlds. You can hear there's just a level of kind of excitement to it. The chorus is also pretty meaningful with the lyrics talking about never being satisfied with what you have. The solo has a really cool build to it that kind of takes you back into the track, so it's really well constructed track as a whole. And Sammy really shows some power with his vocals that's kind of missing on some of the tracks. Now, I wouldn't say all. I mean, obviously, Dreams has some really great vocals, but there's some that are a little bit more subdued, whereas here he's kind of pushing it a little further. I think it's one of the overlooked gems on the album.
It definitely is one of the overlooked gems on the album. It's hard to sit there and conceptualize the fact that 5150 basically means, in police terms for the Los Angeles Police Department, someone who needs mental assistance. It's about a person who is not mentally stable, and so you have this issue like that, and then this song comes out, and the beautiful way that Sammy sings the chorus, the harmonies, the melody of the whole thing, it's very contrasting to what 5150 really means. But at the same time, Eddie took the meaning of 5150 pretty much away from that, and he turned it into his own, because everything became 5150. That for him, that was 5150 was his number, his thing. The amps, the album, the studio, everything.
Yeah.
And so, I love the chorus on this song. Just they're singing that higher register. And of course, David could never get that high. He could sing high notes, but he couldn't sing that high. You know what I'm saying? Like on a regular.
No, I mean, he has a very different voice. I mean, he has his own abilities, and
he's a crooner.
Yeah, he has his own style that fits with what he does. And Sammy could do, he could take the songs that David Lee Roth did and make them his own. He couldn't do exactly what David did, but he could at least perform the songs from before. There's something that Sammy brings to what Van Halen does that David Lee Roth can't do. It's just not his style, and that's no criticism of him. It's just things are how they are, and he just doesn't. He's not much of a singer. He's, like you said, he's a crooner. So
Absolutely.
That leads us to the final track of the album, which is Inside. Like I said earlier, it was the B-side off of Dreams. This is interesting. It's barely a song. But it's also so distinctly Van Halen. There's just a lot of sound going on. The band is clearly having fun. There is obviously a main tune that's going on, but there's still a lot of background noise, talking, just sounds of the, ambience going on. It's kind of hard to explain without hearing it, because it's not just like noise, but it's thought out the way it's constructed, but it's still, there's a lot of sound going on. It's fun, and it's like I said, it clearly shows that the band's having fun, but it's hard to call this a song.
So, like in the beginning of Good Enough, or not the beginning of Good Enough, but in the middle of Good Enough, where they have that breakdown part where they're talking to someone in the studio. This song starts out as the whole first minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes of that going on with a song playing at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then, then the band has this kind of low tone chorus, but then it kind of actually turns into a song in the middle. And then then it blends everything together. It's a really weird song. It is. It's strange. It's cool. It's odd. It's weird. It's very Van Halen, but at the same time, it's just so weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to define it as just strictly a song. It's not like you can just sing along, and I mean, you can to the main chorus, but it's a little harder to define than the typical Van Halen track. It's just It's just them having fun. So
it's just 3 minutes of we need to fill the album with something.
Kind of, yeah.
All right. Well, listening to this album for the first time in a long time, this is a very good album. I mean, it didn't sell 5 million copies for no reason. It's a good album. So there's we've all heard it, however many times, over the years. I mean, it's a 35-year-old album. So we've heard it a million times. We've heard David Lee Roth's albums. This is a good album. There's nothing else to really say about it. I like it. I think you like it. I know. So, we're going to see how it compares to Dave now as we get there.
So, I mean, as a whole, I would say this was kind of an experiment, because you're taking a band that's been established and has put out many albums and has been fairly successful. Obviously, this was their first number one, so they were reaching that point by the time they got to this album. I think whether David had stayed with the band or not, they probably would have released something that was great. Obviously, I don't know if that would have been possible for David to stay with the band, because obviously, things were boiling over. There were some issues, but they were reaching that kind of like that pinnacle of their career in a way. And this was a chance for Eddie to do something new with things that he never felt that they could do with the band before. They brought in a new dimension with a second guitar player, a singer versus a crooner. So there's a lot going on, and I think while this wasn't critically well received out first, obviously the fans saw it very differently. The album became number one despite some really, poor reviews of it. So it showed that sometimes reviewers don't know what they're talking about. In hindsight, I think it is the logical next step of the band. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot to unpack with, what they did with this album, and obviously how it compares to David Lee Roth.
When I was working at the record store, I had some friends of mine who were close with each other because they were friends from working at a different record store, and they ended up going to my store. And we started putting out a newsletter, and we were starting doing album reviews. And the first album I had to review was Achtung Baby from U2. And the second album I had to review was Red Hot Chili Peppers' Blood Sugar Sex Magic. As someone who has reviewed albums, and we do this now, but we also doing it in a hindsight kind of way now. Back then, I wasn't doing it in a hindsight kind of way, and I ripped Achtung Baby, a new one. I thought it was horrible because I was coming off of a previous U2 album that was completely different. And then Achtung Baby comes out, and it's just this completely contrasting style to what they did before. And I was like, this song's horrible. I mean, I gave all the songs really bad reviews, So as someone who knows about that, the people who give these reviews nowadays that are quote unquote professionals, not nowadays, but back through time, critics through time, the ones who give these albums bad reviews, I find it funny when fans like it. And then you have the flip side. They give certain albums these critical reviews. They get these great reviews, and the album sucks ass. Mm-hmm. Okay. Why? I don't understand what it is that critics see in bad albums that they go, oh, this is a great album. It's critically reviewed. And then, once I hear critically reviewed, you might as well trash it because it sucks. It's very seldom are you going to get an album that is critically reviewed and as a good album and also be viewed as a good album by the fans. It's I don't want to say it's rare, but it's so unusual for it to line up like that. And there are albums that do that, don't get me wrong. But it's like when it comes to rock and metal albums, there's just such a contrast in view. I mean, shit, Metallica's Black Album got panned left and right when it came out. Okay, but fans ate it up. And then, certain magazines began to realize, oh, this is actually a pretty good album. This is not that bad, because they began to realize that it was, as much as it was the same band, it was a different attitude or a different concept. So I feel for these reviewers who gave this a bad review, but a lot of them were taken aback. This wasn't your grandma's Van Halen anymore. It was something else that ended up being better. What I mean?
Yeah, that's obviously subjective. But for instance, Robert Christgau rated the album a C+, which he basically said that it was a failed experiment. He wondered how, how people would enjoy this, and he called Sammy Hagar, I think he called him a schmuck or something like that. He said that nobody could stand him, and he was a foolish guy in the industry. It's crazy to think that, and then the album does extremely well. Everybody kind of panned it, and I understand. You're coming from, like you said, you're coming from the idea that this is not the same band that you listened to before, and that's the truth. But I think people need to open up their ears and give things a chance. I see that with, now KK's Priest is coming out. We can talk about that next week when we do this, because the album will be out at that time. There's a lot of people that aren't even going to give it a chance because it's not Judas Priest. That's a problem to me. At least give things a chance.
Yeah, I give it a chance. But the funny thing was, I told you, one time a song popped up, one of the two songs popped up, and I'm like, is this off of Painkiller? Oh, shit, this is KK's Priest.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense because the person who wrote a lot of the music is writing this music, KK Downing, So it makes sense. But in this particular case with Van Halen, although Eddie... I don't want to say he changed his style. He expanded his style and was able to bring more to the drawing board than he was able to do before. Mm-hmm. And that included slower songs. That included songs with keyboards in it. So it basically gave him, he went from playing in the crayon box with 16 colors. And now he's got the 64 color box, and it's like, holy shit, I could do so much with this,
Yeah.
And that's basically what happened. And it took people by surprise, and
for sure
they were in shock with the Giggle Stick song, And then when they realized that there's more to it than that, then they realized this is pretty good. All right, well, that brings us now to David Lee Roth. And David Lee Roth released Eat 'Em and Smile in July of 1986, 4 months after the release of 5150 from Van Halen. It was also released on Warner Brother Records. It was recorded at the Power Station in New York City, New York, Fantasy Studios in Berkeley, California, and Can-Am Recorders in Tarzana, California. And it was produced by Ted Templeman. So the family of people that are associated with these two bands pretty much stayed the same. Don Landee was the engineer for Ted Templeman for all of Van Halen's first 6 albums. Now, he produced the 7th, or was one of the producers. Ted Templeman basically chose sides and ended up with David Lee Roth. He basically said, well, I'm going to go with the guy I think is going to give me the best chance of having a good album. Essentially, that's what it was. And I think he picked the wrong album, but that's just me. And I'm not saying it's a bad album, but when you compared it to in terms of sales, which is what Ted Templeman is trying to achieve, he failed. David Lee Roth's "Eat 'Em and Smile." What you got for me, Chris?
All right, so the first track is Yankee Rose. This is a great start and really shows that Dave wanted to continue, kind of what they were doing before with Van Halen. And does it well. I mean, this is an awesome track. It's a lot different than what Van Halen's doing with their new kind of synth pop approach. And for a lot of fans, I'm sure that was a welcome thing. I love the intro where Dave kind of talks to Steve Vai's guitar, and it talks back to him. It's a really good riff. It's a really good chorus. It's a recognizable song. It's a great start.
This song is absolutely great, and just the whole intro, like you said, with Steve and Steve talking with his guitar to David Lee Roth's vocals. Yes, it's really, really cool. What's amazing to me is that David Lee Roth has been able to surround himself throughout his career with some really amazing guitar players. He's like another Ozzy. He found, for the most part, Steve Vai. Steve Vai was relatively unknown at this time. I believe I forgot what the name of the album he has with the melted guitar on the front, which was his first solo album. That hadn't come out yet. So I think it's Flexible, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. But
I can't remember. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah. So, Steve Vai wasn't a household name yet. So you get this guy, he's playing this guitar, and he's making, sounds, and he's making it laugh, and wow.
It was Flexible was the first one.
So to get a guy who is basically on par with Eddie Van Halen in terms of talent is amazing. So Yankee Rose comes out, and it's basically more of a Van Halen song than Van Halen put out 4 months earlier. So it's almost like, is that a testament to David Lee Roth's writing, or is that a testament to someone else writing a song that caters to David Lee Roth and what he's used to? Okay.
I mean, I tend to think it's a little more of the second, because he brought in musicians that he knew, or at least, his manager, etc., brought in musicians that they knew could cater to the sound that he wanted to create. Ozzy brings in musicians that can do what he wants them to do. Right. And that's that. I mean, he even said at one point, he said, like, Zakk Wylde needs to go off and do his own thing because it's becoming more of a Zakk Wylde sound. So
right.
He was smart in that way of bringing in, and you're right, in a lot of ways he's been able to surround himself with great guitarists. That kind of tapered off towards the end of his solo career.
Well, yeah, I mean, but he's still, you think about it, Steve Vai, Jason Becker, he had Joe Holmes at one point, which Ozzy had Joe Holmes. So he had some really good guitar players. He played with Eddie Van Halen for a long amount of time. So,
yeah. And he did change things. Like his last solo album was very different, and that he did that DLR band, which kind of brought things back at one point, kind of in the middle, where he worked with John 5, and then but he did one album in the middle that was just, it was weird. He had like Travis Tritt on there and some others, it was, I don't know. Dave has always been very eclectic.
That's when fame gets to your head and you say, I could do anything. But
yeah.
As far as Yankee Rose is concerned, it's an amazing song. And
it kicks ass.
Touching about the players again, Greg Bissonette on drums and Billy Sheehan on bass. He didn't just surround himself with great musicians. These are amazing musicians. These are top-notch masters of their craft. All three of them.
Yeah.
Billy Sheehan is considered one of the best bass players in the world. He is amazing. He does finger tapping that like Eddie Van Halen does, but he does it on a bass. Greg Bissonette is considered one of the best drummers on the planet. I mean, it's just amazing the three musicians that he had surrounding him for the two albums, because I think they were on both the first and second album.
It was the same lineup for two albums.
So, so Yankee Rose was, the first song to come out, and you're like, all right, you got David Lee Roth with the assless chaps, and we're back at it again, So it was just like you were back home, very comfortable. The song was very good. He did a great job. The guitar playing was amazing on it. So Yankee Rose, top-notch song. Love it.
All right, that brings us into track 2, which is Shy Boy. Shy Boy is actually a carryover from Billy Sheehan during his time with Talis. So this is a cover of a Talis track. It's such a killer track. The original version is really good, and the singer, if you go back and listen to it, if you take a minute, just find it on YouTube or something. Singer actually has a really similar voice to Dave in a lot of ways, so it makes sense. That maybe Billy Sheehan heard him and was like, you know what, you could do an awesome version of this track. I don't know the genesis of kind of how this came to fruition, but like I said, it just makes sense. I would say this version is superior, though, because what's really different is Steve Vai's guitar playing, and Steve Vai does an amazing job on this track. There's a section where he's in syncopation with Billy Sheehan, and it's just mind blowing. It's really good. They're playing extremely fast, extremely technically here. And it kicks ass. Like, this is one of the best tracks on the album.
That part you're talking about where they're playing syncopated, you don't realize it until you get to the end where you hear the finger tapping and you realize that the finger tapping is a bass. Because the whole time they are note for note, millisecond for millisecond, dead on with each other. Yep. And then at the end, when they kind of separate a little bit and you hear Billy just go, doo, 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 then you're like, holy shit, that was a bass, but it wasn't just a bass. It was the bass and the guitar together. It's amazing. Yes, I have the same understanding that you have, that this was an old Talis song. It was written as a tribute to Van Halen to a degree. He had a guy who he could get away with it. And so he was a big Van Halen fan, Billy. And so he wrote that song in the vein of Van Halen, in the style of Van Halen. And so he brought it to Dave and said, hey, check this out. So now you're adding another song that is in the style of Van Halen to the singer that used to be in Van Halen. So now you have two songs that you're saying to yourself, well, this is like a Van Halen album, And so that's what the appeal was for fans of David Lee Roth with this album and these songs. So right now, fans of David Lee Roth and fans of the old Van Halen, the ones that drew the line in the sand, were extremely happy with this. And Shy Boy is one of the songs that I was talking about earlier, that whole frenetic pace that really, quote unquote, didn't exist, except, when we talking about, you expressed that maybe it was solos and live and concert. On record, it was a song that one got introduced 4 months earlier, and maybe a couple of songs off of Women and Children First, or a couple of moments. So Shy Boy is this song that kind of goes with that new thing that Van Halen is this frenetic sounding band. Shy Boy is a killer song. When I first heard it, I was like, yes, David Lee Roth is back. And he was kind of. Then he left again.
Well, I mean, even the next track, track 3, I'm Easy, it's not out of the realm of anything different than David had done with Van Halen, because it reminds me a lot of tracks like Ice Cream Man.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, any of the covers he did on this album, this is essentially an extension of Van Halen, this whole album.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, this track is much in the vein of those covers, like you mentioned. it sounds a lot like what he did on his Crazy from the Heat EP. It's fun. It doesn't. These kind of tracks never did a lot for me. Like, I like Ice Cream Man in the context of the Van Halen album. I think it's fun. It's a nice way to kind of show that there is like some experimentation, and they can take these old songs and make them fresh in a way. But as far as like a killer track, it's not one that I think of like, oh, I'm going to listen to I'm Easy,
No, but like where Ice Cream Man succeeds is that you have this slow little intro, and then it turns into this raucous rocker. Okay, I'm Easy is an updated version of a quote unquote standard, and it really doesn't go anywhere. It is what it is. It is a updated version of an older song. It's a fine, cover, quote unquote fine cover when you say he did an adequate job. But did he make it his own? No. Did he make it awesome? No. He just made it another version.
Yes, that's a fair assessment, I would say. All right, that takes us into Ladies' Night in Buffalo, track 4. It's a funky disco track, somehow works and reminds me of, something off of like Lost Control. It's not exactly the same, but I think if you listen to both tracks, you can probably understand what I mean. It's got a decent solo that kind of keeps rising as it goes. It's interesting to hear Steve Vai doing something like this because it's really not his typical style.
No, this song is cool in the fact that it's like you almost get the sense that you got two guys just driving in the car and they're cruising and the street lights are going by, and you just, it's a ladies' night in Buffalo. That's all. That's the sense you get. It's just two guys cruising, and it really, you're just cruising to nowhere. Essentially, it's a cool song, but it's not something that will grab you and bring you to the next level. But it's a cool song, It's not a bad track. It's not a really like standout amazing track, but I think it's cool. Like, it fits the vibe of the album. Right.
All right, track 5 is Going Crazy, and this is another one that stands out as being a bit more of a Van Halen sound, while also including some interesting unorthodox percussion from Sammy Figueroa. The solo is really good, and I love what Billy Sheehan's doing on the bass here. I think this is one of the better tracks on the album.
Going Crazy is a cool song. It ties in with the words "Crazy from the Heat." It ties in the EP to this album, so it's kind of come full circle. The lick, or the little lick at the beginning, the riff part that's picked, is very Van Halen-esque, but much smoother, not as mechanical as Eddie is with certain things. So it's really cool. I like this song a lot. It's got a very catchy chorus. It was a big hit for him. So it was one of the songs that pushed this album over the edge as far as platinum status and all that's concerned. It's a cool song. I like this song a lot. I think this is the if I'm not mistaken, it's this song on the video, either that or I can't remember, where he dressed for the cover. The cover artwork.
That's
so. Yeah, so it's a really pretty cool song. I mean, it's hard to really describe it because it is. It's got a lot of percussion. It's got a lot of stuff going on, like you mentioned. I like the song a lot.
Yeah, and it was the second. I kind of failed to mention this was the second single. The fourth single was "I'm Easy," track 3, and the first single was "Yankee Rose," and we haven't gotten to the third single yet, so I'll mention that when we get there.
All right.
So the next track is "Tobacco Road." It's a good version of the track. It's been recorded by a lot of people. It was originally by the Nashville Teens. It was written by another guy. I can't remember his name. John Loudermilk. So he had written this song for the Nashville Teens. It was covered by Lou Rawls, the Blue Magoos, the Blues Magoos. I'm not familiar with them. Jefferson Airplane, Rare Earth, Edgar Winter's White Trash, and apparently about 20 other people. It's another one of those, like, does he really make it his own? I would say in some ways, yes. It's not a bad track by any means. It's just, to me, it doesn't stand out compared to some of those tracks like Yankee Rose, Shy Boy, Going Crazy, etc.
I think
even Ladies Night in Buffalo.
Really, I like this song. Does he make it his own? Probably not, but he does a really good version of the song on this album. So I give it to him on that. Like, to me, this is better than I'm Easy as far as a cover is concerned.
Agreed, 100%. Because it's a better song in general. Honestly.
Right, it's a better song. It's more fun, and they play it that way. You know, and I like the way he does stuff. He's able to actually show a little bit of his vocal prowess in this song, but it's not like the way Sammy Hagar shows off on Dreams. So it's
but you can't compare.
No, you can't compare. But at least he's showing off what he can do, and it pays off on this song.
Yeah.
To me, the song is a fun song, especially coming off of a really crazy fun song with Going Crazy. So it works for me on this album.
I agree. It definitely works on the album. There's nothing wrong with it as a track. But like I said, to me, it's not one of the standouts, but I think it definitely belongs on this album.
For sure.
All right, so that brings us to track 7, Elephant Gun. Elephant Gun is another blazing fast track. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of Hot for Teacher. It definitely, it's definitely great to hear another Van Halen reminiscent track here. So we've got, 3 or 4 at this point that are very Van Halen-esque from DLR's, era of the band. And it's a short song. It's only 2.5 minutes. And it feels even shorter because it's such a good track. What'd you think?
It's a good song. Like it's one of those songs again that adds to the quote unquote legacy of the frenetic songs that just literally started happening this year or 1986 at that point. Right there with Shy Boy, right there with Get Up, and so. It's a pretty cool song. It's fun, it's fast, it's quick. It's like, get in, get out, boom, done. And it's good. I mean, it's not crazy catchy, but it's a good song.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. All right, that takes us to track 8, Big Trouble. So interestingly enough, this title was a leftover title from a song that was not produced from Van Halen that eventually became Big River. So that one was originally called Big Trouble. Big Trouble takes things a little bit slower, especially after that last track. David kind of speaks over it. He uses his speaking voice, kind of telling a story over the track. The overall sound is a bit more along the lines of what we would hear maybe on his next few albums. The solo is quite nice, with Vi really dancing all over the guitar. That kind of reminds me of how, like, on Summer Nights, Eddie's just kind of like exploring the guitar the whole time. Very different sound, but same kind of concept, showing Vi can really take it all over the guitar, and it just be a lot of fun. Very good.
It's almost like the song was meant to showcase Steve to some degree in a more
agreed
in a quieter setting, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
because there's not a lot going on as far as the song being all over the place.
Yeah, it's not a frantic pace or anything like that, but he still is kind of dancing, along with the song. It's a really cool, way of him exploring the guitar.
Right, exactly. For what it's worth, it works at this point in the album, but it's nothing is overall to write home about. For what it's worth, the second half of the album so far has not been outstanding. It's just been kind of steady as far as songwriting is concerned. Not steady in terms of the flow of songs, but steady in terms of they're not a great song, a bad song, or a great song, a mediocre song. Everything's kind of like middle of the road as far as songwriting is concerned.
I see what you mean there. Yeah. Well, that takes us into track 9, which is Bump and Grind. This track almost has like some Aerosmith qualities. It reminds me of kind of some of the stuff that they were doing in the 90s, interestingly enough. It's pretty excuse me. It's pretty typical David Lee Roth, kind of crooning, larger than life, but to me it's kind of a throwaway, It's one of the tracks that I would say I kind of forget about. When I got to it, like I've listened to this album many times over the years, especially when I was kind of in my Van Halen stage. Like there was a time when I listened to them constantly, and I would throw in a lot of these songs, and this was one that kind of I always forget about, kind of escapes me.
I get it because it escapes me too. By this point in the album, because things, Tobacco Road, you got Going Crazy, which ends side 1 if you have a record or a cassette. And then you got Tobacco Road it kind of starts it off pretty good. And then Elephant Gun is a good song, but not a great song. And then Big Trouble's a okay song, not a really good song. And Bump and Grind.
It's just kind of going downhill.
Yeah, exactly. The album's starting to go downhill at this point. And Bump and Grind is just kind of like, all right, it's time to get this over with type of song.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel about the final track, That's Life. It's That's Life. It's a great song in its original form. I like it. I like his version of it. I would say it's not the version I would think of. It would probably be the Frank Sinatra version that I would tend to think of. But it's kind of hard to beat the original with one of those. So I think Dave does a great job of singing it. It shows kind of like that crooner voice that he can really do. And it's a lot of the stuff he wants to do. And I think that's what's fun about it, is that Dave likes taking these old songs and singing them and crooning them, and just, enjoying himself. And it does show that he's enjoying himself there. And so I really do feel, in the vein of some of the stuff he had done before with Van Halen, this was a good way to end the album. I just kind of wish maybe they had cut a couple of the tracks before it to bring it along a bit sooner.
Yeah, I can see that. It is definitely, it's very similar to Happy Trails from Diver Down. It's a song, That's Life. It's the end of something, and it works for the album. It
works very well. Yeah.
It's a good version of it. I mean, they thought highly enough of it to release it as a single, but is it really something that you want to be a single? Do you want to be known as a guy who sang That's Life? A cover version of it. Like for me, you have Yankee Rose as a single. You've got Going Crazy as a single. I almost would have rather them put out maybe Shy Boy as a single, or Elephant Gun, something more upbeat, something more up-tempo, something more in line with what he really is.
Yeah.
He did a killer version of California Girls, right? But, the contrast to that is, he got away with putting out the other single from the EP, which was Just a Gigolo. He got away with putting out Just a Gigolo from the EP as a single or as another track, and because it's not necessarily one of those kind of tracks that says "see you later," like Happy Trails or That's Life.
Yeah.
But That's Life, it's kind of like it definitely needs to be an album ender. It needs to be some sort of, an ender of a greatest hits type of album. But, like I said, it's a good version. I just don't know if I would have wanted to release it as a single. I would have wanted to keep the momentum going in terms of the kind of songs I'm releasing as a single.
Yeah, no, I think it's an odd choice for a single. It's a good version of the song. It's it's fun. It shows David Lee Roth having fun. So I get its placement on the album. Again, weird single.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I mean, as far as the album as a whole goes, I think this was a good smattering of kind of what David Lee Roth wanted to continue doing and some new things he wanted to do too. This brought in a little bit more of his approach to things. But I don't necessarily think that's the best thing, because some of those covers that he did with Van Halen I thought were a lot more fun, and they kind of made it their own, kind of like what you said earlier, where they would turn it into it would start off maybe in the same way, but it would turn into a rock version of some of those songs. So this was a great first album from him. I think is a bigger step for David Lee Roth because he's going alone. He's not having that same camaraderie that he would have had if he was one of the three members that stayed together. So this was a bigger step for him. This was definitely more critically acclaimed, but like you said earlier, this album did not do as well, monetarily as 5150. Did not reach the heights in the charts. There wasn't as much of mass appeal as what was going on with 5150.
The reason for that to me is because of the eclecticness of the album. Because there's a I'm Easy, because there's a That's Life, because there's a Tobacco Road, and then you have a Shy Boy and a Yankee Rose. It's all over the place. There's nothing wrong with that if you're a fan of David Lee Roth, because that's the way David Lee Roth is. If you're a fan of Van Halen, if you think about it,
It's a cohesive album.
Right. With Van Halen and David Lee Roth together, there was a collaborative effort in terms of choosing the covers that they would do. So they made them into Van Halen songs. Pretty Woman, excellent version.
Oh, especially. Yeah, that's probably the version I think of the most when I think of Pretty Woman.
Right.
Even more than the original. Because it's so recognizable.
Exactly. Obviously You Really Got Me, is their own version. So when you have these songs that you Van Halenize, I guess you could say, it becomes their song. But Dave comes in and doesn't have anyone telling him, hey, I think you should try a different cover. There's no one really to sit there and fight Dave for getting a song on the album. So Dave basically got his way. And it shows that he needed someone to bounce something off of. And maybe Ted Templeman was that person. Maybe they did have that argument or discussion or debate or whatever you want to call it. But, it obviously shows that these were the songs that he chose as covers, and that's what he ended up putting on the album. This is definitely a David Lee Roth album. It's a great album for Dave, but essentially it doesn't live up to what he's done in the past, except for the songs that are really meant to be that. Yankee Rose and Shy Boy, even Shy Boy is technically a cover. Going Crazy, those were good songs. And he had some good songs in future albums, but overall the albums were letdowns. So I think looking at the two albums side by side, there's a reason why one sold more than the other. There's a reason why more fans took to a song. This wasn't about David Lee Roth getting screwed by the marketing team. It was straight up, they pushed the hell out of this album. It had videos, it had singles. The people's choice was Van Halen over David Lee Roth as far as albums are concerned. And in my opinion, I'm going to have to go with the Van Halen album 5150. It was much more cohesive. It was a stronger album, a stronger effort overall.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think David Lee Roth had a bigger hill to walk up than Van Halen did in a lot of ways, but that doesn't really matter. The fact is that when Ozzy put out, Blizzard of Oz versus when, Ronnie came in and joined Black Sabbath, they put out two albums that can pretty well go head to head. I find this harder for, to view them as close. Eat 'Em and Smile had some great tracks. Yankee Rose, Shy Boy, even Ladies Night in Buffalo, Going Crazy, Elephant Gun. I think those to me are the standout tracks. Whereas up until like pretty much Inside, I think really all the tracks on 5150 are really good. Even Love Walks In, which never quite appealed to me, I totally get why people love it. It's I can see it and listen to it and say this is a hit song.
It's the melody. The melody of the song is what makes it.
Yeah. So, I think, again, yeah, you said it's a much more cohesive album. This got some really, really recognizable tracks for me. And then there is more to it than that. Like, I remember watching the Live Without a Net, which had a lot of this stuff on it, and just the feel of the band at the time, and they were just having so much fun, and I love the album, so I have to go with 5150.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing I can say about that, though, if you want to contrast it, is if you give me a whole album of Shy Boys and Yankee Roses, I would think if they're just as good as those two songs, give me 8 out of 10, then that album would blow away Van Halen's album. But
it could.
It didn't happen. Possibly. So we don't. That's a theory. It didn't happen. So I do have to say one thing about Eat 'Em and Smile. It's available out now. There's a Spanish version that Billy Sheehan convinced David Lee Roth to do because he said that there was a big market in Central America. And so I don't know if Billy meant for him to re-record all the lyrics in Spanish, but that's what Dave did. They kept the music pretty much identical. I don't think they changed anything track-wise, except I think there was one edit later on, I think in Elephant Gun or Big Trouble, something like that. But he sang the songs all in Spanish. I have that on vinyl, the original release. It's called Sonrisa Salvaje. It's, Wild Smile, if you want to put it that way in English. It's really, it's the same album, just with different words, and it's pretty cool. It's fun, to listen to Dave sing in Spanish. But unfortunately, it fell flat on its face in Central America because they basically turned around and said, "Oh, that guy's singing gringo Spanish," so they didn't really. It didn't really appeal to everyone there. So
Gotcha.
It wasn't like, Maná and Rock en Español. It was, it just fell flat. But I have it. I think it's really cool. I finally got it on CD as well, I think. It came out in 2007. So I finally got that on CD. I always wanted, digital versions of it. So it's pretty cool. I mean, same album cover, just the liner notes are in Spanish. So it's a pretty neat version. All right.
Okay.
So that brings us to the big four for tonight. And the big four tonight is the big four David Lee Roth songs. I believe we've done Van Halen in the past, or Sammy, or something like that. And now it's Dave's turn to get the big four treatment. I don't know. You want to go first, or you want me to go first?
Go ahead.
All right, so I'll go first. So this was a tough one for me because in reality, it's been a long time since I've heard Skyscraper, and it's been a long time since I've heard A Little Late Enough. And I'm not just talking about A Little Late Enough as a song, just the whole album in general, the whole Skyscraper album. It's been a while. I have heard Just Like Paradise, but I haven't heard the rest of the album. There's a reason for that. The albums are not that good overall. They're like listening to generic David Lee Roth Van Halen songs. So my big four is a very narrow big four. So my number 4 song is Paradise, or Just Like Paradise. I like that song. It continues in the vein of Steve Vai, Greg Bissonette, Billy Sheehan, and David Lee Roth, the band being together. It's cool. I like it. Good background vocals. So it's my number 4 song. After that, these songs are gonna sound real familiar. Number 3 is Going Crazy from Eat 'Em and Smile. It's just a fun song. It's a really cool song. I like the percussion that's all over it. I like the guitar picking that's on it. Just the way Steve plays. It's a really cool song. Number 2 is Shy Boy, also from Eat 'Em and Smile. How do you hand someone a song that's just like Van Halen to the old singer for Van Halen? It works. It's a really cool song. I like it a lot. And number 1, hands down, Yankee Rose, to me, is the best David Lee Roth song that's out there. So all 3 songs, 1, 2, and 3, came from Eat 'Em and Smile. So there wasn't a lot of diversity for me, but that album was probably his best effort in terms of music releases that he's done.
I would agree, and hilariously, we have the same big 4.
Oh, wow.
It's different order, so I'll go over my order. But so my number 4 is Going Crazy. My number 3 is Shy Boy. My number 2 is Just Like Paradise. And the biggest reason I have it at number 2 was I remember listening to that song so much as a kid, because I actually had this on cassette tape, whereas I didn't have Eat 'Em and Smile till later. So it just had more of an impact, as a album for me at that time. And then my number 1 is Yankee Rose. I just think it's the best track that he released as a memorable track. I love Shy Boy, but there's something special about Yankee Rose.
Yankee Rose is awesome.
Yeah, I actually really love the album Skyscraper. Knuckle Bones, I think, is a really good track off of that one. And there's a few others, like the actual song Skyscraper, I think is really cool. Stand Up. I had that one for far longer than I did. I got Eat 'Em and Smile, I would say like 5 or 6 years later.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't listen to it as much. But I think after that, they're just, Jason Becker joined the band, and, he's a really young talent at that point. And unfortunately, that was around the time he started getting sick. And I don't think he had enough time to really grow into his role. It's unfortunate. And then, how I wonder how things would have gone had, he still remained healthy, not just for his career, but for, his impact on playing with David Lee Roth, because even around the time that he was recording, he was having issues. So, who knows where that would have gone and how that affected the album as a whole. So, but I agree with you. The first 2 albums are really the only ones that are substantially good. After that, what he did in the 90s, I thought was not really for me. He released in 2003 Diamond Dave, which it's okay. I think it was a better effort than the previous 2 albums, but at that point, I just felt like he had kind of lost it.
Yeah,
and then,
he did. I mean, he didn't really do much after that. Then he tried to rekindle himself with the DLR band, and that just really didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, he did what's the talk show on the radio for a little while, and then eventually in early 2010s he rejoined Van Halen. So it just it showed that early in his career, when being surrounded by better musicians like Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan, there was definitely more quality there, and it just kind of sunk from there, unfortunately.
Yep, and that's definitely the case. I mean, he had he had some really good players around him, but eventually, I mean, I'm looking at the list here. I mean,
think about DLR Band. Not to interrupt you, but he played with John Five, and he played with Ray Luzier. From who did you just see him play with?
He was with Korn.
Korn?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, that's kind of weird. But
but the funny thing is, it's equivalent in terms of talent to what he had with Greg Bissonette and Billy Sheehan.
But very different style of music.
Oh, very different style, yeah. But Ray Luzier is a killer drummer, regardless. John Five, he plays it all, and so supposedly, I mean, John keeps talking about how he has the album, it's in the can, it's ready to go whenever Dave wants to release it, and he said that there was going to be something coming out soon. So who knows how that really is going to go down? But
interesting. Okay.
So we're all just waiting for it to happen. But yeah, I mean, he had John Five with the DLR Band. I mean, he had Jason Becker on a Little Late Enough, and then Your Filthy Little Mouth is when he kind of went and didn't really have anybody great. Travis Tritt on co-lead vocals. John Regan on bass was the guy who played with Frehley's Comet. He's a really good guitar player. He's solid, but he's not Billy Sheehan.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, he's had a very interesting career. I mean, he's got a Las Vegas residency coming up in January. So, good luck to David Lee Roth. I mean, he's
absolutely
definitely up there in age, and he's still entertaining. So that's great. It's awesome.
I love that guys like that can continue doing what they love to do, and people will go see them and enjoy themselves, and that's amazing to me. I'm so happy that bands like Judas Priest are still out there playing, and doing what they love to do. And the fact is, if you don't like it, if you don't care to see them, you don't have to go.
Absolutely.
So it's just great that people can continue to do what they love this long.
For sure. All right, well, peeps, that is our big 4 David Lee Roth songs for tonight, and that brings us to the end of today's episode. So let me remind you once again, you can find this and all of our previous episodes on your favorite podcast platform, so please don't forget to click the subscribe button.
That's right, and if you enjoyed what you heard today, be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, or send us an email to debatingmetal@gmail.com. If you use Spotify, be sure to check out our playlist from our greatest hits episodes as well. Make sure to tune in to the next episode when we spark up another exciting metal debate. On behalf of Kenneth and myself, stay safe, and remember, always turn it up to 11.
See ya.